Hello, my name is Joe, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to submit my second entry for Book Trek 2024, The Wrath of the Summer of Trek. My first book was Star Trek Shell Game. It was an original series novel. And my second book's probably a little bit more familiar territory for me. It is a Next Generation novel, and it is called Ghost Ship by Diane Carey. I mentioned it's probably more kind of familiar for me. I realized reading this that despite its flaws, I feel comfortable with the crew of the Enterprise D. Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Voyager, those are my two series. I like 90s Trek. I mentioned I did not like Deep Space Nine in the 90s, but when I watched it many years later, it was like a new Star Trek show that was of the 90s, so it was perfect for me. So I like 90s Trek, and then I think reading a Next Generation book, I'm willing to forgive its flaws, and boy, does this have some flaws. I'm willing to forgive its flaws. I've mentioned before, I've had some trouble with Star Trek novels. I generally don't like if a Star Trek series has something that just blatantly goes against canon, if the characters don't seem like themselves, or if it's, the first mission, or young Kirk, young Spock. In the past, I've not liked that. I think, and this book kind of has that, I think the fact that I've identified that this is an aspect of Trek books that I don't like, I think that has helped me maybe overcome it. So I bet if I go back and I read that young Kirk book, Star Trek Enterprise, The First Adventure, for example, I think I would enjoy it, and I think I would get a lot more out of it. Also, again, I just like Next Generation. So this book, the basic premise is that it starts out in the 1990s, and the narration starts on a Russian aircraft carrier. And something horrific happens to this aircraft carrier. Something destroys it. And they destroy it in such a way where it leaves no trace of the crew. The crew has just vanished, and the aircraft carrier itself has been destroyed. And there's actually a very, I think, well-written scene where there are Russian pilots that are out, flying, and their aircraft carrier just disappears, and so they have to go find an American aircraft carrier and request landing because their ship is just gone. It was a very well done scene. I really liked it, and the first half of this book I liked pretty well. So, then we jump forward to the present day of on the Enterprise D, and Diane, we start out with Diana Troy, and she's getting impressions of she starts basically what's happening. She's getting impressions of this crew. I mean, a minor spoiler, but it's right in the beginning of the book. The crew of the Soviet aircraft carrier is somehow in the future, and she's getting these images of 20th century Navy ships, and she's like, there's a presence, it's feeding me these images. And Will Riker also has a ghostly vision of one of the crew members of the Soviet vessel, and eventually other members of the crew will see maybe some ghostly images, hence the name Ghost Ship. So not spoiling too much here. And these opening scenes I think are very well done. They're very effective. I'm reading this, I'm very intrigued. I want to know I want to find out what has happened to this Soviet crew and why they are in the future. Then we start getting into, even in the first half of the book, we start getting into the major problem of the book. And also maybe a way to kind of get over that problem. It helped me get over this problem. So this was written by Diane Carey. I've read before she even saw an episode of Star Trek. So this was written as they were just beginning to film the series. Nothing had aired yet before this was written. I don't know the exact timeline, but reading this book, something like that happened. Because the way she writes these characters are nothing like the way the actors portray them on the series. Even in that first season. The first season is a bit awkward. I mean, I mentioned in my previous video, I kind of showed this. If you look at Data here, he's nothing like he's nothing like the way Data will eventually be portrayed. But he is, if you watch those first few episodes of the first season, Data was kind of the writers and Brett Spiner were kind of finding their way with Data. And this does kind of match that first season Data. He has more of a childlike wonder. And this book plays up childlike wonder. I mean, he flat out has emotions in this, for example. The other aspects, so these three characters are pretty important. They're kind of I would say the emotional core of the novel. This book does not follow Gene Roddenberry's direction that there should be no conflict on the Next Generation crew. These guys right here have a lot of conflict. I mean, it's shocking how much Riker basically hates Data. Data will get his feelings hurt, and that causes LaForge to hate Riker. There's a lot of, I mean, the way they talk to each other is ridiculous. I mean, frankly, and even Picard, the way he talks to Riker and the way he kind of, I mean, he's grumpy in that first season, but this is over the top, especially Riker to Data. It's over the top and kind of sickening, even if you're a fan of Next Generation. So, halfway through the novel, that really ramps up. But I mentioned the action and kind of what's going on in the story is, I think, pretty well done. There's a great action scene where the saucer section, minor spoiler, you will get to see the saucer separate, and I think it's very well done. They go to the battle bridge, and the situation gets pretty dire for the Enterprise, and I think it's fairly well done. It's exciting. The second half of the book, once you have a big action scene halfway through, and then the second half is a build up towards the final action scene, or how they're going to resolve the story. And that second half, once we kind of know what the problem is, it starts to drag a little bit. There's a very long sequence that discusses an issue that's very relevant to today. I won't tell you how it relates to the plot, but it is about euthanasia. And you'd think that'd be, this is prime Star Trek stuff, and it's we see a lot of this on the show where they're in the conference room and they're discussing a philosophical issue, and we get that in this book, but man, is it way too long. And it's not helped by the fact that Crusher plays a big part in this scene, and she doesn't seem like herself. And again, a lot of interpersonal conflict between the characters, and it does kind of take you out of it. I think if I had read this maybe before my revelation that, this is an aspect of book Trek that I don't really like, I think I would have not liked this. But I think now I have an easier time overlooking a book's flaws, continuity with the show flaws, canon flaws, characterization flaws. I think I can overlook that now. I think I've gotten past that. And I can look at, see what the book does very well. And that's kind of the first half and building that mystery. I think it's very well done. And then the final action sequence, it's fine. It's interesting. And then you do get, not a big spoiler, but you will get some resolution between these characters, and they become a little bit closer to what they will become on the show. The other aspect is, it feels like a first season episode. I kind of like that first season. It's a bit awkward. Some of it feels a bit like. It's like some of the sets feel like the original series, so I have a soft spot for the first season of TNG, and this feels like that. It's a little awkward finding its feet, so there's a charming aspect to it. If you're looking for a TNG book to read, this is not the best one, but if you want to read number one and you want to read, you like kind of the oddities sometimes of book Trek, you might find some enjoyment of this. So I think that's all I'll say for now. Oh, last thing. I mentioned this before, the cover is beautiful. I love these early TNG covers. They're amazing. If we compare it to one of the next books I'm going to read, the Star Trek Voyager book, this cover's not bad, but you can see it's pictures of the actors, an uninspired angle of Voyager, and it's just kind of cut and paste. Whereas this is there's some artistry here. I'm just realizing, is that supposed to be the Enterprise? I don't know what ship this is. Whatever it is, it looks great, but it sure isn't the Enterprise. I have no idea what this ship is. I am just now realizing that. But anyway, the artwork's great. There's something really special about these early TNG books. So anyway, it's okay. Coming up next, I'm going to read one of these two books. I've heard very good things about this Star Trek Voyager #2, The Escape, by Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush. I've heard good things about that. I have not read the back, don't know what it's about, but I've heard it's worth reading, and I do like Star Trek Voyager. But I also might read another book that I've heard from multiple sources is very well done, and that's the novelization of Star Trek The Motion Picture by Gene Roddenberry. I've heard that maybe Alan Dean Foster, who was famous for writing novelizations of sci-fi movies, I've read his Alien novelization. It's great. I've heard that Alan Dean Foster had a big hand in this, but regardless, I've heard very good things about this. I've heard that it might even be better than the movie itself, and I don't know. Star Trek The Motion Picture is my favorite Star Trek movie, so if this tops that, I'm in for a good time. But I think that's all for now. So at some point, I'll get to that. I'm reading some of June on the Range books, so, I'm going to stick in the Wild West for a little bit before I get back to Star Trek. Summer book trek is going on for 3 months, so I have some time to get to these. But that's all for now. Thank you.